I never imagined that my own wife, the woman who swore to love and respect me for life, would be capable of cheating on me with my own boss at the party celebrating my 10th anniversary with the company. When I saw Rebecca discreetly exiting the back door of the party room followed by Kevin, my heart sank. I'd spent over $35,000 on that party to celebrate my decade of dedication to the company, and while everyone was toasting my success, my own wife was backstage betraying my trust. I followed them both to the parking lot, and when they saw me, the shock on their faces confirmed my worst suspicions. But what happened next would change my life forever. That's when I discovered that the betrayal was not only emotional, but also financial, and that they had been conspiring for months not only to destroy my marriage but also to ruin the career I'd worked so hard to build for an entire decade. What I didn't know was that humiliating moment would be just the beginning of a series of discoveries that would lead me to lose almost everything I had before finally regaining my dignity and rebuilding my life. How did I bounce back after such a betrayal? What happened to Rebecca and Kevin after I confronted them on that night that should have been a celebration of my career? If you've made it this far, you probably recognize that relationships aren't always what we imagine, right? Here on this channel, you'll find a safe space where real stories like mine are told without judgment. These stories will move you, make you reflect, and perhaps even help you better understand your own experiences. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this community where every story matters and where you're always welcome. Now I'll tell you all the details of this experience that changed my life forever. My name is Michael Thompson, I'm 38 years old, and I've worked in the financial sector for over 15 years. I was born and raised in Chicago, but moved to Boston at 22 to start my career after graduating with a degree in business administration. It was there that I met Rebecca, a stunning 28-year-old woman with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. We met at a fundraiser for the bank where I was just starting to build my career. At the time, I was just a junior analyst, full of ambition, but still in the early stages of the corporate ladder. Rebecca worked in the marketing department of a large cosmetics company, and I quickly realized we had a lot in common: ambition, determination, and big dreams for the future. Our relationship evolved quickly. Within just 6 months, we were engaged, and a year after our first date, we were married in a beachfront ceremony on Cape Cod with 150 guests. I spent practically all my savings on that wedding, over $45,000, because I wanted it to be a perfect day for Rebecca. She'd always demonstrated refined taste and frequently mentioned how her friends had lavish weddings, so I went to great lengths to give her a celebration second to none. At the beginning of our marriage, things seemed perfect. We rented a comfortable apartment in an upscale neighborhood in Boston, and although it was a bit more than we could afford at the time, I was determined to provide the best for my new wife. As the years passed, my career began to take off. At 30, I received an offer to work at Horizon Financial Partners, one of Boston's leading financial advisory firms. The offer included a salary of $150,000 per year, plus bonuses, almost double my previous earnings. Kevin Matthews, the company's CEO, seemed to have seen something in me. During the interview, he mentioned that I had the fire in my eyes he sought in his employees. It was a life-changing opportunity for me. With the new salary, we were finally able to buy our own home, a $650,000 property in a quiet suburb, with 4 bedrooms and a spacious backyard. Rebecca had mentioned several times that she wanted to start a family, and I figured this house would be perfect for that. However, as my career progressed, I began to notice subtle changes in our relationship. Rebecca, who had initially supported me and celebrated every promotion with me, seemed increasingly distant and dissatisfied. When I got home, I would often find her on the phone with her friends, planning expensive outings, or browsing luxury shopping sites. Our credit cards began to rack up debt, mostly on designer clothes, handbags, and jewelry that she insisted she needed to keep up appearances at work-related social events. At first, I didn't mind. After all, I was making a good living and wanted my wife to be happy. If buying a $3,000 dress or a $5,000 handbag made her happy, I considered it an investment in our marriage. Besides, Rebecca was always incredibly charming at corporate events, and many of my colleagues commented on how lucky I was to have such a beautiful and elegant wife. Kevin, my boss, seemed particularly impressed with her. Whenever we had corporate dinners or holiday parties, he made a point of chatting with Rebecca at length, laughing at her jokes and complimenting her style. As the years passed, my dedication to Horizon Financial Partners paid off. After 5 years at the firm, I was promoted to Chief Investment Officer, earning an annual salary of $280,000 plus profit sharing. With the promotion came an even busier schedule. I often worked late, traveled for business at least once a month, and spent many weekends preparing presentations or analyzing potential investments. Rebecca began complaining about my absence, saying I neglected her and prioritized work over our relationship. I tried to compensate for my absence with expensive gifts, an $18,000 Rolex for her 35th birthday, a $25,000 diamond necklace for our anniversary, and a 2-week trip to Europe that cost over $30,000. However, nothing seemed to be enough. Rebecca was still dissatisfied and increasingly distant. She began going out frequently with her friends, often returning home late at night, smelling of alcohol and expensive perfume. When I questioned her, she said she was just trying to have some fun since I was never available. I began to notice small inconsistencies in her stories, places she claimed to have gone that didn't match the receipts I found, friends she mentioned but never met in person. It was around this time that Kevin, my boss, began to appear more frequently in our conversations. Rebecca would mention how charming, successful, and thoughtful he was, often making subtle comparisons between us. Comments like, "Kevin always finds time for his family, even as a CEO," or, "Kevin said his wife never has to wear the same dress twice to social events," became more and more frequent. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, Kevin was my mentor and boss, a 48-year-old married man with 3 children. It never occurred to me that he could pose any kind of threat to my marriage. When I completed 9 years at Horizon, I began planning a grand celebration for my 10th anniversary. I wanted to organize a party that would not only commemorate my decade of contributions but also serve as an opportunity to strengthen relationships with important clients and potential investors. Rebecca seemed unusually excited about the idea. She offered to help with the preparations, something she rarely did when it came to work-related events. Her sudden change in behavior made me hopeful that perhaps our relationship was improving. In the months leading up to the party, I spent over $35,000 on preparations. I rented one of Boston's most elegant ballrooms, booked a renowned chef for the dinner, selected award-winning wines, and planned a series of presentations that would highlight not only my achievements but also the company's growth under Kevin's leadership. Rebecca was involved in every detail, from choosing the flowers to the guest list. I remember being surprised when she insisted on inviting not only executives and key clients, but also employees from all levels of the company. At the time, I interpreted this as a gesture of generosity and inclusion. The big night finally arrived on September 15, 2024. Rebecca looked stunning in a red dress that cost $7,000, a gift I made sure to give her especially for the occasion. We arrived at the party venue 2 hours before it started to ensure everything was perfect. I remember how nervous she seemed, constantly checking her phone and disappearing for periods of time to check final details with the organizers. At the time, I attributed her behavior to the anxiety of wanting everything to be perfect. The party started promptly at 8 p.m. The ballroom was magnificent, decorated with elegant floral arrangements and soft lighting. Guests began arriving, and soon the atmosphere was filled with the buzz of lively conversation, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Kevin arrived around 8:30, without his wife, explaining that she had a severe migraine and couldn't attend. He made a point of hugging me warmly in front of everyone, loudly declaring that I was the best investment Horizon had ever made. I remember the pride I felt in that moment, completely unaware of what I was about to discover. Around 10 p.m., after an exceptional dinner and several rounds of glowing speeches, I realized I hadn't seen Rebecca in a while. I asked a few people if they'd seen her, but no one could tell. I began searching the room for her, growing increasingly worried. That's when I realized Kevin was also nowhere to be seen. A sinking feeling began to build in my stomach, but I tried to push it away. Surely there was a reasonable explanation for the simultaneous absence of my wife and my boss. I decided to check out the other areas of the place. I passed through the kitchen, the bathrooms, and the outdoor area. That's when one of the waiters, seeing me clearly worried, discreetly approached. I'll never forget what he said. "If you're looking for the woman in the red dress, I saw her leaving through the back doors with a gray-haired man about 15 minutes ago." My blood ran cold. I thanked the waiter and immediately headed for the back doors that led to the parking lot. The night was cold, and the parking lot was partially lit. I walked between the cars, my heart pounding faster. Then I heard Rebecca's voice, followed by a laugh I instantly recognized as Kevin's. I followed the sound and, turning into a row of cars, saw them. Rebecca was leaning against the door of Kevin's Porsche, his arms wrapped around her waist, their lips inches apart. I froze for a moment, unable to believe my eyes. Then I took a step forward, my shoes squeaking on the gravel. They both turned their heads toward me simultaneously. The shocked expression on their faces confirmed everything I needed to know. Rebecca immediately pulled away from Kevin, straightening her dress and hair, as if she could somehow undo what I'd just witnessed. Kevin, on the other hand, remained unsettlingly calm. After the brief moment of surprise, he simply smiled, a smile I'll never forget, not of embarrassment or remorse, but of barely concealed triumph. "I'm not a violent man. Never have been." In that moment, however, I felt a rage I'd never felt before. I advanced toward them, my fists clenched, my breath ragged. Rebecca began to cry, backing away until she was partially hidden behind Kevin. Kevin, however, remained motionless, staring straight at me. When I finally spoke, my voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. I asked how long this had been going on. Kevin replied with disconcerting calm, "Long enough, Michael. Long enough." Rebecca tried to speak, but I interrupted her. I asked if every time she said she was with her friends, she was actually with him. Her silence was answer enough. Kevin then did something that stunned me even more. He put his arm around Rebecca's shoulders and said, "I think it's time we be honest with Michael, honey. He deserves to know." The familiarity with which he touched and spoke to her made it clear this wasn't the first time, not by a long shot. In the next few minutes, as we stood in that cold parking lot, I discovered an even more devastating truth. Their affair wasn't new, it had been going on for over 2 years. And worse, Kevin had offered Rebecca not only his affection but also financial guarantees that, he claimed, I could never provide. He casually mentioned how he had helped Rebecca invest some of the money you so generously give her, referring to me as if I were merely a financial intermediary in some kind of elaborate scheme. When I confronted Rebecca, asking if she had actually used the money I'd worked so hard to earn to invest with Kevin's help, she finally spoke. Her words were like stabs. "You think I'd be foolish enough not to secure my future? You work so hard, you're always away, and for what? So I can spend it all on things that won't last? Kevin showed me how I can be financially secure independently of you." It was at that moment that I fully understood the extent of the betrayal. It wasn't just emotional or physical, but financial as well. Kevin then delivered what could only be described as the final blow. He glanced at his watch and said, "Well, I guess it's time we got back to the party. After all, I still have a speech to give celebrating your 10 years of contribution." The sarcasm in his voice was palpable. He then turned to Rebecca and said, "Honey, you'd better go in first. Michael and I have some business matters to discuss." Rebecca hesitated for a moment, looking at me with what seemed like a flash of remorse, before nodding and walking back into the ballroom. As soon as Rebecca was out of earshot, Kevin's expression changed. The smile disappeared, replaced by a calculating coldness that revealed the true man behind the mentor facade he'd maintained for so many years. Michael, he began, shaking his head as if disappointed in a wayward son. "Did you really think a woman like Rebecca would be satisfied with a man like you? You may have a talent for business, but there's always been something missing in you, that willingness to do whatever it takes to truly reach the top. I remained silent, trying to process not only my wife's betrayal but also the complete shift in dynamics with the man I'd considered my mentor for a decade. Kevin continued, his voice now almost bored, I've been watching you for years, waiting for you to develop that last layer of, shall we say, killer instinct that separates the good from the great. But you've always been too upright, too ethical. He practically spat the word ethical, as if it were some kind of insult. Rebecca, on the other hand, he smiled, she understands the game. She knows that life isn't about working hard and hoping the world recognizes your worth. It's about taking what you want. I finally found my voice. And what do you want, Kevin? Wasn't it enough to be my boss, to control my career? Did you have to destroy my marriage too? He laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the empty parking lot. Don't be so dramatic, Michael. Your marriage was already destroyed long before I entered the picture. And as for what I want. He paused, his eyes fixed on mine. Let's just say there are certain businesses at Horizon that require discretion. Businesses that generate substantial profits for some of us, but that need to be kept off the official books. You were getting dangerously close to discovering some of these special arrangements. Rebecca was incredibly helpful in keeping me informed of your suspicions, your investigations. The pieces began to fall into place in my mind. Over the past few months, I'd noticed inconsistencies in some financial reports, discrepancies that seemed small in isolation but, taken together, suggested a troubling pattern. I tried to investigate discreetly, keeping my suspicions to myself until I knew for sure. Apparently, I hadn't been discreet enough. You're laundering money through Horizon, I stated, not as a question, but as an observation. Kevin neither confirmed nor denied. Instead, he shrugged and said, business is complex, Michael. There are always gray areas. Some of us simply know how to navigate these turbulent waters better than others. He then took a step toward me, his voice lowering to an almost conspiratorial tone. I'm going to offer you a choice, Michael. You can make a scene now, ruin the party, try to expose what you think you've discovered about the company and my relationship with Rebecca. This will certainly make your life hell for the next few months, with a public and humiliating divorce, and it will ensure that you never work in finance again. He paused, letting his words sink in. Or you can be smart. You can return to that room with a smile on your face, end the night like the good soldier you always were, and tomorrow we'll begin discussing your transition out of the company. A dignified exit, with a generous severance package and positive references. Your choice. In that moment, I felt like all the air had been sucked from my lungs. 10 years of career, building my reputation brick by brick, and now it was all crumbling in a matter of minutes. My marriage, my career, my self-confidence, everything was being ripped away from me at once. Kevin must have interpreted my silence as submission, because he smiled again, straightened his tie, and said, "Good boy. Now, let's get back to the party and show everyone what it means to be a true professional." He started walking toward the ballroom, clearly expecting me to follow him meekly. But something inside me refused to accept that ending. All the anger, humiliation, and betrayal crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. "No," I said, my voice firmer than it had ever been when addressing Kevin. He stopped, turning slowly with an expression of disbelief. "What did you say?" I repeated, louder this time. "I said no. I won't play along with your games. I won't pretend nothing happened. And I definitely won't allow you to oust me from the company I helped build so you can continue your fraudulent schemes." Kevin's expression hardened. "You're making a grave mistake, Michael. A mistake that will cost you everything you've built." I took a step toward him, feeling a confidence I hadn't known I possessed. "No, Kevin. It was your mistake to underestimate how much I've learned about your operations in the last few months. It was your mistake to think I wouldn't have made copies of the documents I found. And the biggest mistake was believing I would be easily intimidated." His pupils dilated slightly, the first indication that his confidence was shaken. "You're bluffing," he said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. I smiled, not a smile of happiness, but of determination. "Do you really want to risk it? Because if I go down, I'll take you with me. Every email, every transfer, every tampered record, I have copies of everything, stored in secure locations. If anything happens to me, or if you try to ruin my reputation, this information will go straight to the FBI, the SEC, and every major financial newspaper in the country." Kevin paled visibly, but quickly regained his composure. "You wouldn't do that. You'd destroy not just me, but the entire company. Hundreds of people would lose their jobs, including many you consider friends." It was a low blow, appealing to my concern for innocent colleagues, but I was prepared. "The responsibility would be yours, not mine. You put everyone at risk with your actions, not me. But I'm willing to settle." Now it was my turn to dictate the terms. "I'm resigning tomorrow. Voluntarily, quietly. In return, I want a year's salary as severance, impeccable references, and your guarantee that you'll never interfere with my career again in the future. And as for Rebecca." I hesitated for a moment, the sting of betrayal still raw. "Well, you two certainly deserve each other. You can have each other." Kevin studied me for a long moment, probably trying to determine if I was bluffing. Finally, he nodded slowly. "We'll have to discuss the details, but I think we can reach an agreement acceptable to both parties." He extended his hand, an offer of a temporary truce. I deliberately ignored it. "Don't mistake my offer for forgiveness, Kevin. I will never forget what you did. I'm simply choosing to leave this situation with as much dignity as possible." I turned to leave, but then stopped and added, "By the way, you can inform the council that I won't be present for the rest of the celebration. I think I've had enough partying for today." I walked to my car, ignoring the messages that started arriving on my phone, probably Rebecca looking for me. I drove to a nearby hotel and booked a room for the night. I needed space to think, to process everything that had happened, and to plan my next steps. As I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, a strange calm washed over me. Despite everything I had lost that night, I felt I had somehow regained something far more valuable, my integrity. The next morning, I did exactly what I'd promised. I arrived at Horizon at 7:30, before most employees, to clean out my desk and prepare my resignation letter. Kevin arrived shortly after, looking as if he'd gotten as little sleep as I had. We spoke briefly in his office, finalizing the terms of my termination. True to form, he attempted to renegotiate, offering 6 months' salary instead of a year. I stood firm, silently reminding him of what was at stake. In the end, he gave in to all my demands, though clearly resentful of doing so. When I left Horizon for the last time, carrying a box containing my few personal possessions, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness at the end of a decade of my life, anger at the double betrayal I had suffered, but also a strange sense of liberation. For years, I had defined myself by my work, by my marriage, by a version of success that I now realized was shallow and empty. Now, for the first time in a long time, I was free to redefine who I was and what I wanted from life. When I got home, I wasn't surprised to find Rebecca gone. Her clothes were still in the closet, her beauty products still in the bathroom, but she'd obviously decided not to return home after the party. I figured she was with Kevin, probably figuring out how to manage their new dynamic now that I was out of the equation. I decided I wouldn't wait for her. Instead, I started packing my own things. I didn't take much, just clothes, a few books, photos of my family, carefully removing Rebecca from all of them, and important documents. The rest, the house, the furniture, the expensive electronics, I would leave behind. They were just things, after all, and I was beginning to realize how little things mattered. That same afternoon, I contacted a divorce attorney. Jennifer Blackwell had a reputation for being relentless, especially in cases involving infidelity. I explained my situation in detail, including my suspicions that Rebecca had diverted money to personal investments with Kevin's help. Jennifer listened attentively, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "Mr. Thompson, based on what you've told me, we have a solid case for a divorce that will protect your interests. Your wife's infidelity, especially with her direct supervisor, combined with possible financial misconduct, gives us several levers to negotiate a favorable settlement." In the days that followed, I discovered that Rebecca had withdrawn over $300,000 from our joint accounts over the past 2 years. Money that, according to Jennifer, I would be entitled to recover in the divorce proceedings. I also discovered that Rebecca had opened secret accounts in her name, where she was apparently accumulating funds for a life without me, or perhaps a life with Kevin. The irony was that, while she planned to leave me, she continued to spend my money on luxuries and extravagances, apparently seeing no contradiction in this. Rebecca finally contacted me 3 days after the party. Not by phone or in person, but by email, a gesture that demonstrated how distant our relationship had become. In the email, she attempted to justify her actions, blaming my dedication to work, my alleged emotional neglect, and a host of other imagined failings on my part. There was no apology, just a clinical statement that our marriage had naturally ended, and that she had found happiness elsewhere. She concluded by saying that her lawyer would contact me to discuss the terms of the divorce. I responded with just one sentence: "Jennifer Blackwell of Blackwell Legal Associates is handling my case. Please direct all future communication to her." I added Jennifer's contact information and nothing else. I didn't mention the secret accounts, the embezzlement, or the fact that I knew far more about her betrayals than she realized. Jennifer had advised me to keep this information as a cover for negotiations. Over the next few weeks, I rented a small apartment in downtown Boston and began looking for a new job. It was harder than I expected. Despite the positive references Kevin had promised, I discovered he was, in fact, subtly sabotaging my search. There was nothing explicit, he was too smart for that, but I received feedback from several interviews suggesting there were unspecified concerns about my sudden departure from Horizon. It was frustrating, but not unexpected. Kevin was playing his game, testing my resolve. After nearly 2 months of fruitless searching, I decided to change tactics. Instead of seeking employment at large financial institutions, I began exploring opportunities at smaller companies, startups, and independent consultancies. It was during one of these searches that I met Robert Chen, a former Horizon colleague who had left the firm 3 years earlier to found his own consultancy specializing in wealth management for retail investors. We had always gotten along well, and he seemed genuinely happy to hear from me. We arranged to meet for lunch, and after a few minutes of casual conversation, Robert got straight to the point. "I heard rumors about your departure from Horizon. People saying you were investigating irregularities. Is that true?" I hesitated for a moment, debating how much to reveal. Finally, I decided on honesty. "Yes, I found evidence of accounting manipulation, possible money laundering." Kevin was at the center of it all. Robert nodded, not looking surprised. "I suspected something like that when I was there. There were numbers that simply didn't add up, clients I'd never met personally, transactions that were processed outside the normal system. It was one of the reasons I left." We continued talking, sharing our experiences at Horizon, and I gradually realized Robert had a proposal in mind. Finally, over coffee, he presented it. "I'm expanding the consultancy, Michael. I'm looking for someone with your experience and integrity to lead our new investment analysis division. The salary would be less than what you were earning at Horizon. We can offer $180,000 a year to start, but there's potential for significant growth as we expand our client base. Most importantly, it would be an environment without the ethical compromises you've faced recently." The offer was tempting. Lower than I was used to, yes, but after months of unemployment, any steady paycheck would be welcome. Plus, there was something appealing about working for a smaller, more agile company, where ethics weren't just a word in an annual report, but a daily operating principle. I accepted that same day. Robert smiled, looking genuinely pleased. Welcome aboard, Michael. I think this is the beginning of a very productive partnership. While my professional life began to stabilize, the divorce proceedings continued to move slowly. Rebecca had hired a high-profile lawyer, clearly paid by Kevin, who tried to argue that she was entitled to half of all our assets, including my recent settlement from Horizon. Jennifer, true to her reputation, counterattacked aggressively, presenting evidence of Rebecca's financial misappropriation and prolonged infidelity. The situation took a surprising turn when Jennifer discovered that Kevin had recently separated from his wife, Catherine. Apparently, Catherine had discovered his affair with Rebecca and decided to end their 22-year marriage. More importantly for my case, Catherine was willing to testify about Kevin and Rebecca's relationship, confirming that it had begun at least 2 years earlier, while they were both still married. It was the external confirmation we needed to strengthen our case. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that fateful night in the parking lot. In the final settlement, I kept most of my assets, recovered the $300,000 Rebecca had embezzled, with interest, and was released from any alimony obligations. Rebecca kept some jewelry and luxury accessories she had purchased with my money, but she had to give up the house and almost everything else. It was a significant victory, although the emotional cost was substantial. Interestingly, throughout the divorce proceedings, I never saw Rebecca in person again. All communication was through lawyers. I learned through mutual acquaintances that she and Kevin had moved into a luxurious apartment in Back Bay, apparently continuing their relationship now that they were both free. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction imagining the inevitable moment when Rebecca would discover Kevin's true character. After all, a man who cheats on you will likely cheat on you too. But to my surprise, I discovered I no longer cared. Rebecca and Kevin were part of a closed chapter in my life. In my new role at Roberts Consultancy, I found a professional satisfaction I had lost in recent years at Horizon. We worked primarily with small business owners, independent professionals, and middle-class families seeking financial security, not the millionaires and billionaires who had been Horizon's focus. Clients were more approachable, more grateful for our advice, and there was something deeply rewarding about helping ordinary people navigate the complex world of personal finance. As I settled into my new life, I also began rebuilding my personal life. I moved from my temporary apartment to a modest but comfortable condo near the office. I started running again, something I'd neglected during my most intense years at Horizon. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while immersed in the overwork culture. And slowly, I began to rediscover who Michael Thompson was when he wasn't defined by his work or his marriage. About a year after leaving Horizon, I received an unexpected call from Catherine, Kevin's ex-wife. She wanted to meet me to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Curious, I agreed to meet her at a discreet cafe away from the financial district. Catherine was an elegant woman of about 45, with a calm, determined presence that immediately commanded respect. After brief formalities, she got straight to the point. Michael, I'm working with the SEC on an investigation into Horizon's financial practices. Specifically, Kevin's activities. This caught me off guard. I knew Kevin was involved in questionable activities, but I hadn't expected a federal investigation to be underway. The investigators are particularly interested in your time as Chief Investment Officer. They believe you may have valuable information. Catherine looked me straight in the eye. I know you probably want to put all this behind you, but I'd like you to consider cooperating with the investigation. I thought about the deal I'd made with Kevin, the implicit promise to remain silent in exchange for my peaceful exit. But then I thought about all the investors who continued to trust Horizon with their money, unaware of the manipulations taking place behind the scenes. What exactly would they need from me? I asked. Catherine smiled, as if she already knew what my answer would be. Any documentation you might have about irregular transactions, testimony about practices you witnessed, names of other employees who may have been involved or who may have had knowledge. Would I have to testify? Would my name be public? I was rebuilding my life, my career, and I wasn't sure I wanted to get involved in a high-profile financial scandal, even as a cooperating witness. Catherine shook her head. At this stage, your involvement would be confidential. Investigators are gathering information, building their case. It may never come to a public trial if Kevin and the others involved accept a plea bargain. I thought for a moment and then made my decision. I'll help. I have copies of all the documents I found, notes of conversations, dates, amounts. I'll tell the investigators everything I know. Catherine looked genuinely relieved. Thank you, Michael. That could make a real difference. Kevin, he's not the man I thought I'd married. What he did to us personally was terrible, but what he did professionally, using clients' trust for his own enrichment, is simply unforgivable. I nodded, completely understanding her sentiment. If I may ask, how is Rebecca? Is she still with him? Catherine smiled sadly. As far as I know, yes. But not for long, I suspect. Kevin is incredibly charming until he's no longer useful to him, and then he becomes a stranger overnight. Rebecca will probably find that out soon, if she hasn't already. Over the next few weeks, I cooperated fully with SEC investigators. I provided all the documents I had collected, spent hours in interviews detailing what I knew, and helped identify specific patterns of questionable transactions that had escaped their attention. The entire process was kept strictly confidential, as promised. Robert, my new boss, was surprisingly understanding when I needed time for these meetings, although I never explained exactly what I was doing. 6 months later, the news broke. Kevin Matthews, CEO of Horizon Financial Partners, had been indicted for fraud, money laundering, and a series of other financial violations. The scandal made the front pages of major financial newspapers, detailing a years-long scheme that had embezzled millions of dollars from investors. My name was never mentioned publicly, but I received a discreet phone call from one of the investigators informing me that my cooperation had been instrumental to the case. Kevin eventually struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a shorter sentence, 5 years in prison instead of the potential 20 he faced. Horizon survived the scandal, albeit with its reputation severely damaged and under new management. As for Rebecca, I learned from Catherine that she had broken up with Kevin shortly before his indictment, allegedly because he had begun to show his true domineering and manipulative nature. Without Kevin's fortune, which was largely confiscated as part of his plea bargain, and without my financial support, she was forced to sell most of her luxury goods and move to a significantly more modest apartment. There was a certain poetry to this downfall, though I felt no genuine joy in her misfortune. Today, 3 years after that night in the parking lot, my life is almost unrecognizable compared to what it was before. Robert's consulting firm has thrived, in part due to the exodus of clients from Horizon following the scandal, many of whom followed me when they learned I had joined the team. I was promoted to partner last year, with a profit-sharing package that more than offset the initial pay cut I took. Most importantly, I find genuine meaning in my work now, helping real people achieve financial security through ethical and transparent means. In my personal life, I met Julia, a college English literature professor, through a local running group. Our relationship evolved slowly, organically, based on shared interests and aligned values, not superficial attractions or material considerations. We've been together for a year now, and we recently began discussing a shared future. It's an entirely different kind of relationship than the one I had with Rebecca, honest, mutually supportive, fundamentally healthy. Sometimes, when I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that devastating moment in the parking lot, watching my wife and boss betray my trust, was, paradoxically, one of the most important and potentially positive moments of my life. It was the catalyst that forced me to reevaluate everything, my values, my priorities, the definition of success I had unquestioningly adopted. The betrayal cost me dearly in the short term, but it freed me from a toxic marriage and a career that was slowly eroding my integrity. If I could go back in time and avoid that pain, would I? Honestly, I'm not sure. As Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. The betrayal didn't kill me, though for a while it felt like it. Instead, it forced me to grow, to redefine myself, to discover an inner strength I didn't know I possessed. It's a lesson I carry with me every day. Sometimes, what seems like the worst moment in your life is actually the beginning of something much better. If you've made it this far, you probably recognize that relationships aren't always what we imagine, right? Here on this channel, you'll find a safe space where real stories like mine are told without judgment. These stories will move you, make you reflect, and perhaps even help you better understand your own experiences. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share in the comments if you've ever experienced something similar or what you would do in my shoes. Be part of this community where every story matters and where you're always welcome. Thank you for listening.